Ready to get started tonight. Let's give the Hargraves a round of applause before we even start. They have been wonderful to come. They're teaching all day. They're also teaching master's students in family therapy earlier in the day. So we're going to pray for stamina and energy for you too. Let's bow our heads. Lord, we thank you for this space and this place. We thank you for the calling we have to be agents of reconciliation and love and connection. We thank you for all the things we're learning in these classes, and we ask your blessing on the Hargreaves tonight as they share with us. And all God's people said, amen.
Well, welcome. We're glad you came back. You know, it's always like a roll of the dice. You know, it's like, well, is anybody going to come back to this tonight? So we're in the third part of a four-part series. Remember, just to give you a reminder of the context of where we're coming from. You know, the first week we talked about, you know, what it is that we face. This is by far the most polarized time that we've had, maybe in 100 years, worldwide. And it's an intense time. It's where brother and brother don't speak to one another ever again. You know those stories. Maybe you experience them in your family. And it's a huge time of reactivity. Because people are polarized in their belief systems, it is a time where people are fighting and dying over any number of issues. But we discussed that first week how people, when they get reactive, some of them get very frightening. They get aggressive, they get angry, they get sarcastic. They really go after you. And it makes you want to go like, I just want to disappear. I want to avoid that person. Other people become enormously controlling. They tell you what you're thinking and what's wrong with you and what you need to do to change. And those kinds of people, they're unapproachable. They're like, you know, I don't need any other further direction from you. I learned all those things in the second grade. Then you have people that their reactivity when they face these things, they just go away. They look for any excuse just to escape. They don't want to talk about it. They don't want to think about it. They are missing in action. And quite frankly, they just look like they don't care. And then you have people that take everything personally. You know, like everything is just falling apart, and it's got to be connected with me, and why am I not powerful enough to do something about this? They look really needy and fragile. That's what polarization does to us as a group. And then, you know, we finished out that first week by saying, but Jesus says to us, hey, if you're thinking about doing those things to get rid of everybody else, forget it. Because that's not the plan. The plan is we are one. We have a communal grouping that is called usness. We were created out of usness to begin with. We are designed to work in a church community with an usness. We have diversity that are supposed to cooperatively work together in one body. It's not just a man and a woman that were created to be one flesh. It is the whole church. That's what Jesus is talking about when he says, I am the vine, you are the branches. I am in you, you are in me. Yeah. Sorry. You know, I wish we could just forget it and be done with people. But that's not really the way it works. And then last week, we talked about how we get stirred up by that kind of reactivity, and it really forces our pain. It challenges us in the basic root of our primary emotions. Our identity gets challenged, like somebody is making us less than, or they're making us feel unloved or unwanted. Those are all the things that are the basis of our identity. or it makes us feel unsafe. It makes us feel threatened. It makes it feel like things are unpredictable, that I don't want to be vulnerable, because if I am, I'll be persecuted. Love and trustworthiness are how we form a sense of identity and a sense of safety. Those are what we call primary emotions. All this other stuff that we talk about in emotional language, like anger, like withdrawal, like joy even. These are all emotions, yes, but they're secondary. In other words, they're reactive in nature. We have got to learn, if we're going to get through this, what we learned last week is that we have to learn how to speak the language of pain. Not the reactive pain, why are you so upset? But instead say, what is driving that upsetness in you? What is driving the anger? What's behind that? What are you fearful of that is happening if all these things come to pass? So not only do we have to pay attention to what's going on with us, we have to pay attention to actually communicate what is that pain that is going on with you. And we only get to it by getting past the reactivity. Make sense? Okay, let's talk more reactivity then. That's what I'm after, right? Okay, so the ways that we get triggered by others. In other words, if you're like me, I can't watch television for 10 minutes at any one stint, any time during the day without getting kind of going sideways. I get triggered by people's reactivity. I hear extreme positions no matter what I watch, okay? It's always out there. This time in particular, there are tricks of the trade that are going on that you need to be aware about. First of all, what will get you triggered into your pain is everybody else's reactivity. There is no way to even watch a peaceful demonstration without getting stirred up somewhere. And I'm not talking about just a demonstration on an area you disagree with. I mean, it's just impossible to watch a demonstration on either side of an issue without having some feelings. You see people getting way too aggressive. You feel them being way too fragile or taking it way, way too personally. You see them withdrawing and walking away. You see them trying to over-control and manipulate things. Our good senator from Arizona, our junior senator from Arizona, goes to the bathroom. You saw this, right? Followed into the bathroom, almost followed into the stall, but they were waiting outside the stall for her. That kind of reactive emotion in the face of it causes you to just go sideways. Quite frankly, I don't see how she held it together as well as she did. But that was certainly a triggering event. Imagine if that were you, right? The second thing is that this polarized behavior. We live in a society right now that states everything into extremes. This is I hate to pick on one area because it's been around forever, but the proliferation of media just makes everybody who has a podcast mic an authority to be able to discuss polarized language. And you know about the spread of misinformation, everything that's going on. Polarization are behaviors or statements that are designed to overemphasize difference. In other words, that's how I get a following. And the more dramatic I make it, the more polarized I make it, is saying, I know what you are trying to do. That polarization breeds conspiracy. And if you really think that somebody is out to get you, it doesn't matter whether somebody's out to get you. You feel it, right? You get triggered by it. Just the fact that somebody said it out loud may make it so, right? Are you hearing me? Polarization is bad. Anybody that tries to trick you into this. So you believe that, for instance, if you were pro-choice, you believe, if I were a pro-lifer, you believe that a child has no rights whatsoever. That's a polarizing statement. I'm trying to force you into a position that you do not want to take, that you probably do not believe. Yet the statement is polarizing. Does that make sense? We have to start recognizing polarizing statements and quit trying to address them with sanity. We'll never get to it if we try to address these kind of polarized statements. Second, and the third thing is that we really face, really in spades, in this era is entitled behavior. In other words, everybody feels that they can make any statement they want to or be as reactive as they want to because, by golly, I have a right to say what I think and do what I think and do what I want. It's my right, no matter what. And I don't care, in exercising my right, what it does to you. Grow up, right? This is an entitled position which says that I don't have to cooperate with anybody or anyone. There is no communal personhood that I have to be concerned about. It's only me. Does this make sense? So, gang, remember, these things, I don't know if you have this reaction, but boy, these things trigger me because I see these tricks every day and they still get under my skin, right? So what do we do, right? Because we know, from last week, I hope you learned that when you get triggered, you have a tendency to get reactive. Excuse me. Just my brother. We have a tendency to get reactive ourselves. And that if we get reactive, we will end up going down this same exact road. How do we stay out of that reactivity?
So I wish that we could tell you that we have the solution and the key and the way that you can change other people. Bad news. I hope you didn't come here just to learn that. We don't. The trick becomes, we showed you last week this coping in pain and in stress. That we have these stances of blame, shame, control, and escape, and we talked through those a little bit last week. So this week, I had a person tell me pretty directly that they didn't think I stood for truth because of a position I had in something, on something. I'd give y'all examples, except for that would just go down a rabbit hole I don't want to go down. So, if you were me and somebody accused you of not standing for the truth, and I've been a Christ follower since I was young, and living for Christ is my life, what of those behaviors up there do you think I might do? Might I get defensive? Might I get a little sarcastic? Might I start to perform and tell them all the great things I've done that would show that their statement of me was not true? Might I walk away from the conversation and minimize that relationship really isn't important to me, when it actually is a very, very important relationship to me. These are the things that we automatically do when we're confronted with pain, when our sense of safety or our sense of identity is challenged. So what's the other way, right? So if we want to think of it this way, we've talked about this idea that you can't change what you will not name. You also can't get to a behavior of what you want to do if you will not name it, right? So instead of blaming, when I feel myself wanting to blame or get critical back to somebody, the option, and remember, we're just naming the options here, right? The option is that I would nurture that person instead, is that I would be loving, I would be encouraging, I would be supportive, accepting, kind, gentle. Instead of getting mad and doing this, I would figure out some way how to do this, right? And pull them in. The difference, instead of shaming ourselves, of course, the difference would be to put a little value in myself. And this is a situation where I kind of started to shame myself a little bit. I kind of started thinking, I should have seen this coming. I should have handled this before now. I shouldn't have let this relationship get to this place. I should have known. Instead of that blame and shame onto self, what we should be able to do is start valuing ourselves and be positive and be humble and respectful and aware. And in this conversation, what I was immediately aware of was, wow, I didn't expect this quite in this intense of a form. But it's going to be okay. I can handle this. Confidence coming across that way. I'm a controller. I've confessed that sin, right? And when you ask people the opposite of control, they usually don't know. It's like, well, no, you're just supposed to take care of everything, right? But the opposite of control is this idea of balance, of give and take, and we've talked about that a little bit. And when we approach relationships from an issue of balance, of give and take, we are open, we're vulnerable, we're engaging, we're accepting. We admit we're imperfect. It was important for me in this particular conversation to calm myself enough to know, to say, wow, I didn't understand that this had affected our relationship like it had. I should have known. I didn't. It's okay. I just need to talk this through with you. I'm going to be relaxed. I'm going to respond in such a way that it's not, I'm going to take control of the situation and tell you how you ought to think, right? I can do that pretty easily. Instead of withdrawing from a relationship, I should be able to stay connected. Instead of disappearing, I want to be responsible. I want to be reliable. Remember, I think Terry mentioned the fruits of the Spirit: love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, gentleness, self-respect? No. Generosity, self-control. Self-control is really an important part of walking in the Spirit, and it's a really important part of staying connected. When you want to walk out of a relationship, when you want to leave a relationship, when you want to leave the room, when you want to shut up, when you want to shut down, it takes energy. It takes decisions. It takes intentionality to say, I'm not going to leave, I'm going to stay. I'm going to stay here with this person. Ephesians 4. You were not taught with regard to your former way of life to put off your old self. We got to take this old behavior off that was on that gray dark chart, which is being corrupted by deceitful desires, to be made new in the attitude of your minds, and to put on your new self, created to be like God in true righteousness and holiness, so that when someone looks at me and says, Sharon, you no longer stand for truth because of your position in that area, that I have to figure out how I can be true to myself, how I can express an opinion and not just react in all the ways that are going to be destructive and difficult for the relationship.
So this is hard work. This is no fun. This is hard work to take off the old self and put on the new self. And how do you do that? How do you put on that new self? It's there in that scripture. You have to be made new in the renewing of the spirit of your mind. In other words, what Paul is telling us, and this is a real kicker to me. If I didn't believe in Scripture after I'd read Paul, I'd think I'd believe it, just on the veracity of this. So Paul is saying something 2,000 years before neuroscience tells us the exact same thing. The pathway to change is, as crazy as it sounds, is to plant something new in your brain. Think about it. Mull over it. Make it a habituated thought in your brain. And it starts creeping into your behavior. That's how you renew your mind. The lie that you tell yourself is absolutely that these people that are so reactive, so polarized, so entitled, they're idiots, they're stupid. Right? I mean, that exact phraseology has come out of my mouth 1,000 times in the last year. I'm dead serious. That's the first thought that I turn to. And when I say those idiots, those crazy people, what do I look like? The exact same reactive, polarized, entitled individual that I'm criticizing. There's only one way out of that, Paul says. He says you have to be willing to take off the old self. This is not just the major sins like adultery or embezzlement. This is everyday sin, like gossiping and thinking unkindly of your neighbor. The only way out is to get yourself in a position where you can talk about their pain. For me, and just to go over this very quickly, is the idea that when you look at this cyclically, you see, when you start concentrating on words that give you clear identity and clear sense of safety, then it really positions you. It puts you in your right mind. As Paul literally says, it becomes your second nature. Your natural nature is to fly off the handle, be triggered. Your second nature is learned to be loving and safe with other individuals. And let me tell you, in any reactive situation where you get triggered, if you can achieve this, if you can put on this new self, bingo, you've just at least tripled your chances of having a better outcome of the one that was originally reactive. This is our game plan, gang, is to put us in a position where we can start talking about each other's pain. I didn't mean to do that. Yeah, this is what we call the peace cycle. For me, I come from a family that was physically abusive. I'm the fourth of 4 children, just like Sharon, but my story doesn't have a lot of tragedy in it in terms of the big events. My family had a problem in just being flat unloving and unkind from the get-go. Now, I need to tell you that, after my younger years, the last 30 years have been a remarkable story of forgiveness and reconciliation that I'll tell you about at another time. But those 35 years, my first 35 years, were extraordinarily painful because of the physical abuse. They left me feeling unloved, unwanted, and felt like I could not measure up. That is the lie that I bought into. So therefore, when it feels like when I get triggered, when I get lit up, it's when somebody makes me feel like I'm not cutting the mustard or that they don't care about me. It lights me up, and I get very aggressive with that. I blame myself. First of all, the aggression goes inward and I shame myself. I become one of those fragile people. But then, if pushed far enough, I'll explode and become extraordinarily angry. My daughter at the beginning of the pandemic, right? We were in Atlanta. Sharon told you this story. We were in Atlanta. She got a call from Pepperdine and says, you need to come back to Pepperdine today. We got on a plane and we left. Our son and his wife called us and say, they're getting ready to shut down New York. We're getting out of town. We're coming to you, all right? Now, my daughter also lives in New York with her 2 children and her husband. She just went, this triggered her tremendously because she was staying in New York. And from her reading about COVID-19, and remember, this was at the very, very beginning when we knew very little, when there were no directions on masking, very little information on social distancing. My daughter said, this is the Armageddon. If they get on that plane and carry the disease to you, you are particularly vulnerable. And she's exactly right. Because I have an autoimmune deficiency. I am vulnerable. I'm one of those vulnerable people that can't afford to get sick. I would be on the list, right? And that's what she knew. And she said, if you go, they need to quarantine for at least 21 days. And Sharon and I were like, well, that's not going to happen. You're being unreasonable. You're over the edge. She said, you don't understand. I don't know if I can talk to you if you don't follow instructions. I mean, it was that controlling. I was just beside myself. When somebody kind of control me like that, not only are you telling me that what I think doesn't matter, but you're also telling me I'm doing everything wrong. What did I just tell you my pain was? So man, I was really ready to get lit up. But here's what I know, all right? I'd practiced enough to know that whether my daughter was making me feel loved, I knew that I was deeply and passionately loved. I knew something was really, really wrong between us. This was not going to get resolved in just coating it over. We were going to have to talk about it. But if I struck that blow as saying, stop telling me what to do, then we'd risk a cutoff. But that's what I felt like saying. Saying, you know how hard I work? You don't think I know when things are risky? You know, all those things that were getting ready to come out of my mouth. I thought, wait a minute. I know who I am. I'm loved. And more than that, I'm man enough to step into this breach without becoming reactive. Remember what we said last week? What is it that we needed to say? We needed to ask, what is fueling this reactivity in you? Honey, what's going on with you? What's driving these extreme statements? Bam. My daughter just bursts out crying. What am I going to do if you get sick and die? Now, in the world of identity or safety, which is that? She was scared. She was unsafe. Can I understand that? Why she's making such extreme statement? If she thinks that my son getting on a plane and coming to me is going to kill me? Now, whether it's right or wrong, can I understand it? That disarms the event enough where you see now I can actually act in valuing myself, but at the same time, I can be nurturing and connecting to her. Not because I agree with her, not because you agree, but because you have common pain. There are things that were scaring me about that pandemic too. Just because I wasn't scared of my son doesn't mean that I was not frightened. And you would probably remember that too, right? Well, she did not cut off. We kept talking, we worked it out, and it increased the likelihood that we came to a caring and nurturing place in our relationship. Does that make sense? Now, your important relationships are like this, gang. It's really, really important that you pay attention to be able to not alienate your family members and your deep, long-lasting friends, and particularly your church members. But make no mistake, you'll still feel like calling people idiots, right? You know, a week and a half ago, I was on a plane, where it's mandatory that everybody wear a mask, right? No exceptions. And I'm a rule follower, right? Because I'm a guy that's concerned about performing and being enough, right? The kid next to me had his mask all the way down, eating, drinking, never putting his mask on. And boy, what was I doing? I was boiling. I was thinking, what an idiot! He's putting me at risk. And then I thought, wait a minute. Is this kid really concerned about me? Is he really trying to drive me into fear? He's a kid. He's a kid that has his own thoughts, his own process. But I'm getting ready to crawl out of my seat and go and slap that mask on his face, right? Why? Because of the rule? No, because I got triggered emotionally by not paying attention to the truth about who I was. that I'm wearing a mask, I'm doing what I can to be safe. Not everybody is going to cooperate with that, but with God's help, I will just take the next step. I'm man enough to take the next step, which means being kind to this kid and sitting on this plane without making a spectacle. Is this making sense? I hope that it at least is bringing home the idea that what we need to be doing instead of talking about positions is talking about pain. But to do that, you have to learn something about your pain. You have another worksheet, right? This is the worksheet. This is a little bit more fun. The one we did last week was the example of where you get lit up in your pain cycle. This one is a little bit more fun, because what we're asking you to do is, what is the truth in this first row of words here? What is a truth that calms your heart, which is actually something that if you put in your mind over and over again would make a difference to you? You know, modern neuroscience has taught us this. We have the phrase, if all things are equal, the brain goes negative. In other words, if all things are equal, the brain will make the wrong choice in terms of keeping you self-regulated. Because your brain is designed to go like this, right? It's saying, fight, flight, I need to be on my feet, I need to be ready to go. Your brain is always looking for danger, in other words. All things being equal, your brain will go negative. In order for it to go positive, it takes effort. This is what Paul is talking about in renewing your mind. These truths are not just something I want you to identify once. Sharon and I want you to put in this message about the truth daily, hourly, as much as you can cram it in. This is what you need to bathe yourself in. You need to soak in this truth. Instead of rehearsing all the stories of how you were done wrong in your identity or violated in your sense of safety, you need to be going over the words and the actions that showed you how important. I grew up in a lousy family. I married into an extraordinary group who, when I was in need, they swam out and saved me. When I think about that love that saved a wretch like me over and over again, guess what? I do better. I leave the kid on the end seat alone. I'm able to ask my daughter, what's driving your pain? Does that make sense? That's what we're asking you to do. Take a few minutes. Identify those top words, that truths that would speak to your heart, that calm your soul, calm your identity, calm your sense of safety. Identify 2, 3, 4 words. that as you look at those truth words, make sure those truth words are addressing the pain that you identified last week. Like, in other words, if you're going to say, well, I'm fearful, you need something that would address being fearful. If you say, I feel unloved, you would need something that would address feeling unloved. A couple more minutes. Now, just where you're sitting, just call out some of those words that would be calming to your soul that you identified for yourself. Just shout it out. Jesus loves you. Yeah, absolutely. Accepted. Not alone. Safe. Appreciated. Absolutely. You see, it's like it's freezing outside and we demand trying to go without a coat when we stay in our pain. When we put on these words, it's like we're renewing our mind. It's like we're wrapping up in a warm shawl to keep us safe, to keep us warm and loved. This is the kind of nurturing that our soul really needs. Now take a look at that bottom list. If you were able to feel that way, appreciated, safe, that Jesus really did love you, not just in a song, but he really, really did love you. What actions would you be able to take that would be more nurturing, more connecting, more balanced, more self-valuing? Identify 2 or 3 of those. Now just shout some of those words out to me. Positive. Patient. Confident. Supportive. Humble. Guys, gang, if people were that way to you, you'd say, oh, give me some more of that. I want to rub that all over. I mean, you would love for people to treat you like that. See, this is the balm of how we turn around our society, is we start acting this way to ourselves. We stop putting ourselves in the framework of being reactive. Now, am I Pollyannish enough to think that means that we're not going to be polarized in positions? Absolutely not. But what it does mean is that we will hang together. If we hang together, we will eventually get through this and see the value in each other. and the oneness and the diversity that makes us a body. That's what we need to be able to do. Now, next week, I just want to tell you that we're going to talk a little bit more in depth of saying, okay, so this is the pathway, and I'm absolutely committed to the pathway. Over and over again, when you find yourself in a hard place, take this pathway. It will work for you. But you're still going to run into some people, right? That you're going to have to say, how am I going to handle this one? Because I've tried my peace cycle. I've tried to be kind. I've tried to access their pain, and it's not working. What do I do then? We are going to talk about that some next week and try to reason that. But I don't want you to just pass over this lightly. I want you to take a good, long, hard look at what God says about us in terms of our own identity and sense of safety. First of all, you are God's masterpiece. As Presbyterians, you're way familiar with Ephesians 2:8 and 9. For by grace you've been saved through faith, and that not of yourselves. You got that right. Verse 10, for you are God's workmanship. Eugene Peterson in the Message interprets that workmanship to bring it out. In other words, you're his craftsmanship. It's Eugene Peterson that calls that his masterpiece. Like you're his fine painting. You are deeply, deeply unique in every single way for the way that God strung you together. If you ever wonder where your identity rests, you're a masterpiece, right? You're passionately loved. I love this passage that Paul quotes out of Hosea. She that was not loved or was cast out is now called beloved. The best stuff is that we have every right to be on the outside looking in, but we find ourselves, because we are passionately loved, on the inside looking out. We need to appreciate that we are passionately loved and let that truth soak into our hearts. And this passage out of Deuteronomy, I will never leave you nor forsake you. You cannot be alone. You are held in somebody's heart massively. I'm going to go back to this verse in a second, but just to address safety. There are truths around safety. Now, the world is not safe, all right? God did not create the world to be safe, right? He created the world to have choice. An unfortunate choice has been made. And so we live in a fallen place that is scary at times. Just remember this. While you're limited, you are empowered to do something. The mistake that we hear over and over again in counseling is people say they think, I'm going to be all powerful in my life and control every aspect of my life. Or they say, I don't have any power at all. I can't do anything. Neither is true. God gave us the ability to be empowered about some things. Some of you know the story of Viktor Frankl, a wonderful, wonderful man that lived as a good part of his World War II in a concentration camp. He wrote his book on humanity, on being human, while in prison camp, on little slices of paper that he would carry on his personhood daily. The man had hope about being positive about life. If people can get hope out of little pieces of paper they carry on their personhood, I guarantee you, we have reason to feel empowered by the strength of what we can do to provide ourselves being safe. You're not alone. People in this church will come beside you. Even when you think no one else understands, I guarantee you there are 100 people within 2 degrees of your experience that totally understand exactly what you're feeling. And I mean through a loss of a child, through a loss of a spouse, through financial ruin. There are people you know that will stand with you. And you're better, you're safer when you're in contact with those people. And always remember this, God is at work even at your pain. David Burns wrote a recent book on the road to character. It's a very good book, but basically he's just saying what everybody else is saying and what the Apostle Paul is saying, what Hebrews is saying. You don't learn virtue when things are going great. You only learn virtue when things are the worst. Even Nietzsche said, that which doesn't kill you makes you stronger. I do want to go back to one thing, though. This last passage, and we'll wrap up with this. This last passage out of Romans. This is the most empowering thing that I can give you. It's good brain science. It's exactly the way the brain works. The brain doesn't work in 50 shades of gray or a million shades of gray. The brain mostly works, particularly when it's triggered, in black and white. That's the part of your brain that really lights up when you get emotionally triggered. It's that part of your brain that's yes, no, right, wrong, black, white. There is no gray in fight and flight, in other words. This is what the Apostle Paul says. For those who live according to the flesh set their minds on the things of the flesh. But those who live according to the Spirit set their minds on the things of the Spirit. This way or that way? Flesh or the Spirit? For to set the mind on the flesh is death. To set the mind on flesh is death. But to set the mind on the Spirit is life and peace. Now you tell me, all those idiots out there that are driving us crazy, on whatever side you're on, all those idiots out there. For us, which is the choice of death? Pain cycle or peace cycle? Or which is the choice of life and peace? Hang in there, gang. This takes work, but we're on our way. Let's pray. God, we thank you that you have such a great plan for us, that in your wisdom, which sometimes that doesn't look very wise, but in your wisdom, you made creation as such that you gave us choice between the flesh and the Spirit. You gave us a choice to address. In that choice, you gave us the ability to address a time such as this. You made us for this time and this place. God, grant us wisdom, grant us courage, and grant us peace by the blood of your Lamb. Amen. Thank y'all. We'll see y'all next week.